In this episode of Podcast Tactics, you'll get tips and advice from a podcaster that created a mashup show that dives into the stories behind the songs we know and love and sports gems. I'm James, the host of Podcast Tactics. If you want to keep learning about podcasting, get inspired, and stay motivated, join the mailing list at podcasttactics.com. Thanks for listening. Let's get into it. Joining me right now is Dr. Z from Charlotte, North Carolina. Dr. Z, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, I'm excited to be here. This is a lot of fun. I've been looking forward to it all week.
Fantastic. That's good to hear. All right, let's... Oh, go ahead.
No. I'm ready to go.
You're ready to dive in. Yeah, so am I. So tell us, what's the name of your podcast and what's it all about?
Well, our podcast is called Pickin and Puttin. And about a year ago, it's Pickin, no ing, Pickin and Puttin. And the deal was, I was always a buddy of mine was a big music guy and in the music business. And now he's not doing it with me any longer. But he started, and I was into golf. So we started out with the idea of doing music stories and golf stories, and then it's kind of evolved. So that's how we got started. And then I'm having fun now going back and looking up history of different musical stuff. And of course, I grew up in the era of the 60s, 70s, and all the hard rock. So that's how we got started. And then this year, kind of starting off trying to figure out how to grow it, how to be more eloquent, bring myself up to your stature and just truly having fun. It's all about having fun. If anything else comes out of it, great, but I'm doing it for the entertainment factor.
That's fantastic. So, the musical part of it is, do you have a musical background? Do you play music? Were you ever in a band, or was it just an interest, a passion for you?
No, I've got, the best friend, his father had been in the music business and we met 30 years ago because our oldest sons were the same age. And as it turned out, his dad wrote Dueling Banjos from Deliverance. So that's his history. So he had a whole musical history. My musical history was that I knew him. Now my kid, my youngest boy plays like 7 instruments, and my attic's got keyboards and drums and acoustic guitars and electric guitars and bass guitars. But no, me personally, no. I love history.
Yeah.
So music lends itself to great stories,
Oh, yeah. I don't want to jump right into it quite yet, but yeah, that really did come across in the episode that I listened to. So, but before we get into that, the mashup between music and golf, talk to us a little bit about that. How did that come about?
Well, I think it's just natural passions. I love music. I can't play it, but it's the old thing about driving along in the car and you start stomping on it and you don't know the lyrics worth the hoot. Everybody thinks they're singing the lyrics and then you hear them and you go, oh my God, is that what they said? But I've always liked that. And now the younger folks are really getting into playing golf and playing. They've got stereos going loud on the golf course and playing music, and they say, "Oh, is this going to bother you?" Oh no, I'm for it. The more noise, the better. So it's just two things that give me enjoyment, Yeah. So that's the fun of it. That's the relationship. It's kind of a goofy bring together, but.
Well, that is what intrigued me about your podcast, right? I mean, I guess it's not just golf too. You guys talk about sports in general. So
yeah, the deal with that is my son-in-law is trying to get he's married to my daughter, and son-in-law. Thank you very much.
That's all right.
Just for that little edification. If you didn't know what that was, folks, that's what that is. But no, he is into sports radio kind of stuff. And so he'll do all this kind of research and things like that. So I get with him and I say, well, we get together at the end of the week. I said, well, what topics do you want to talk about? and we'll try to do things about golf, whether it's equipment, balls, and stuff. And then we'll kind of, it's like, as you know, the next thing you know, you're talking about what happened to Serena in the tennis, So it's a little bit, it's evolving that way with a little bit of sports talk. But I don't want to get into being sport. You need another sports talk like a hole in the head. So I'd like to keep it off where it's fun and different.
Yeah.
I'm happy to talk about lacrosse or whatever anybody wants to talk about.
I think you guys would be onto something. Those more kind of the Ocho sports. Those more obscure sports are for me, they're intriguing. And I think to make a mashup podcast that combines music and those more obscure sports, compelling. I would listen in.
Well, hey, yeah, for now you said that, I'm thinking of that. Maybe got to do cricket.
Oh yeah, if any sport for me was like a Rubiks Cube, I think cricket is the one where I feel like every time. I mean, I haven't delved deep into it, but I try to understand it, and there's always some facet where I'm like, really? Okay. And it's so big in India and all the British Empire that wasn't us or Canada. But yeah, it looks like something cool. So yeah, it'd be fun to look into. I don't understand it either. It'd be fun to make a show around it though.
I like your guitar hanging on the wall. That's cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you know what? It's funny because that guitar hanging behind me is actually my nephew's. So, you got busted.
Busted, yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about your podcast, though. I kind of want to go into a little bit of the challenges that, okay, so I want to back up, actually. You used to have a co-host for this show, and it sounds like you guys had a little bit of a changeover, a transition. How did that come about?
Well, I think I started out, and for both of us, for me, I started out for fun. And I came up with the idea probably about a year ago, January or somewhere like that. And I came up with this idea, and I had the title before I knew what the heck I was going to do. And so I talked to my friend about it, who was musically inclined. He said, yeah, I'll do it with you, once a week. Well, so we were doing it maybe once every other week and whatever. And then he ended up being, by default, I set up how to get it downloaded and everything, but then he ended up being the default editor and YouTube editor, Spotify editor, whatever the editor. And so after this fall, his life started to take off again with his kids and stuff. And he says, you've done 20 episodes. Maybe you want to just roll it off and call it. And I said, no, I'm going to keep doing it. If you don't want to do it, I'll self-educate myself on how to do all the editing in that. So
good for you.
So that part, I mean, I watch on these, I've started to look at the Facebook groups and realize everybody's a different, there really is a neat communication because everybody's at different phases. Well, what did you do? Did you do this? How did you edit this? What do you do for sound? And it really is, the whole process is just a continuous evolution.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
That is well said. I mean, because it's, I do feel like everybody is it's on this journey, everybody's on this journey of like learning this, this kind of craft of podcasting, I mean, I'm definitely at the beginning of that, so eager to learn. And I get that you are too. And that's what makes it fun, and connecting with people, across the world on these, on these shows is fantastic.
Yeah, I think, the idea for your podcast is awesome because I'm going, what a cool idea to go around and talk to everybody at different stages and say, well, what did you do? Or what would you do? Or is it still fun? Or, how's it going?
So let's talk about, some of your successes on the podcast.
Well, the couple of biggest successes we had last year, the most downloaded one was, we did an episode about Dolly Parton, and we were doing specifically the stories behind specific songs. And hers was Whitney Houston had sung the song and made it a hit, and then we had the storyline behind that. And apparently, Dolly was driving down the road and heard Whitney Houston singing on the radio, and goes, wait a second, wait a second, that's my song or whatever. So that was a big one. And then the evolution for the fun part, what you were talking about is there's a young lady who I knew who's about late 20s now, who moved on her own to Nashville right out of high school. She just said, I want to be a singer-songwriter. And so a couple of weeks ago, we had her on and talked about music in Nashville and how she's growing and that. And really fun, really insightful to hear how she's got the board and everything in her apartment and writes music. And so those were my two favorites that we've done.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So it's interesting what strikes a chord with somebody, who listens to something and goes, oh, that's really cool. And the other thing I forget is that these things, you put them out there and they're out there forever. So, forever. And you realize a year later, people are still finding that episode or whatever. And they go, oh, that's cool. I like that.
It's kind of a memento, a memorialization, a snapshot in time, really,
Yeah. And you know what? I was just thinking, it probably behooves any of us to go back, and you just put this thought in my head, to go back and listen to what you did 6 months to a year ago and listen to the quality of your sound, of your video, whatever it is, your topics. And I'm sure you're going to go, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? But, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that's just that kind of retrospective just shows growth, really. I mean, it's hard not to look back. I'm sure it's going to be hard not to look back and cringe, but that just means you're growing, as a podcaster, I think, I think you're always looking for the opportunity to, improve your interview style or your presentation style. That's part of the fun, that's part of the challenge, really, of doing what it is that we do. So
yeah, well, that part makes it, and you're right, the interview style and kind of open-ended questions, or where do you go from here, and if you're doing it, if in this circumstance, being able to play off your interviewee, or with me doing it with another person that I know, that makes that part easier.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one of the things I'm trying to delve into. I'd like to do more where I had guests, from the world, from different, because that's what makes it fun. Like you said, to meet people that from all over the world. I mean, it's crazy. It's I'm looking forward to doing more of that. That's my goal. That's one of my goals for this year.
Let's talk about your podcast in general. I mean, but what is it that you want people to get out of listening to your show? Why should they listen to your show?
Well, that's a good question. I from my background, I do it because I want people to have some enjoyment, have some fun, get out of all the stuff that's been pounded on us for the last year. So I like to think of it as a fun respite where you can go listen to some goofy old doctor talk about something he doesn't know about, and hopefully, put a little zip in your step and have a little more fun, whatever. There's enough downers that I'm trying to be a little bit of a upper for folks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say that, based off the episode that I listened to, you're on the right track. You were successful with the Marley episode. Before we get into that one, I do want to ask you one last question about your podcast in general. What are your hopes for the podcast in the future?
Well, I'd like it to grow, and everybody goes through that. How do you get more? How do you get into monetization? How do you get more? Ears listening and all those kind of things. And I really hadn't delved on that or thought as much about at least the monetary side of it, for sure. I would like to, my goals, near-term goals, are just to see my volumes grow and and see that I can generate interest for folks. And maybe out of that, some different topics from feedback from folks. Well, what would you like to hear about, or who would you like to discuss? Or do I see myself as, 10,000 downloads per episode? Probably not, but I don't think anybody does.
Yeah. I mean, as a goal, sure. But, I think you've got to increment over that. You've got to continue to, create the content, continue to refine and grow, and let that be a side effect of your efforts. I get that you enjoy putting the show together, with, co-hosting with Liberty Bell. You guys have a really good rapport with each other. So yeah, I think that if you continue to, produce content and have fun with each other, I think it'll rub off onto people and word will get around that, you guys are definitely worth a listen.
One thing I think is important is that I'm learning is consistency. So from what I hear people say, so I strive to try to, now I know there are 52 weeks in the year, and so you're not going to probably put out 52 podcasts, but the consistency of putting it out so people know where you are and you release it on the same dates and stuff. I'm working towards trying to do that too. So that people look for it. I don't know what the best dates for releases are, any of that kind of thing, but consistency seems to be important.
Yeah, that's wise advice. That's, I've ran across that as well. You need to set that pattern, so that people who do enjoy your show can rely on that being there, week after week, and if not, then you have a bonus episode or something that has some sort of announcement that's related, you'll be back or something to that effect. But consistency, that's great advice.
Yeah, no question.
Let's talk about the Bob Marley episode.
Okay.
First of all, I want to say that in general, the concept behind the way you guys structure or the way that you structure your episodes, I love it. It's that stories behind ... Well,
it is interesting. A couple things I have tried to do, and everybody doing their show, and you're probably doing that too. I try to instill something at the beginning and the end, so like I do a shout out. The shout out might be like, for example, my shout out this week was Dolly Parton, because she told the Tennessee legislature, forget about it. I don't want a statue on the front lawn. It's not appropriate at this time in the world. And then at the end, I always give a quote. And it might be tied in. And this week, I tied it into Bob Marley quotes, which was fun. But so try to do that. But yeah, I really had fun looking into Bob Marley. That was if you look back on that story, it was an interesting time. I lived through that time frame, and I'm an older guy in my 60s, and I realized when I was looking at it that we lost Bob Marley, John Lennon, and Elvis all within a 24 to 30 month period at the end of the 70s, early 80s. And I said, that, good golly, that was three icons of music that all and they all went away. Good golly, Elvis, you don't realize he was 40. Bob Marley's 36, and I think Lennon was 40.
Man,
and
so
you
young.
think you think they were around forever, but they weren't.
Yeah, it's interesting because I did learn from your episode the circumstances of Bob Marley's death. I had no idea. Now, I don't want to say it on this show because I do feel like people should, tune into your show, give it a listen for sure. But it was, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, an interesting story. Yeah, because the sad part about that is in today's world, if he had managed that differently, he'd still be here.
Yeah, that's it. And that is you bring that point up in your show, and it really it's thought provoking. It really does make you think, if this musician who was already having such an impact and continuing to rise, if he was still around, what would the world be like with that person still around?
yeah, what music would he have produced? Although he's got if you look him up, he's got a huge family line of kids who've been in music and very successful, daughters and sons. So, they carried on, and I dare any of you to go to a place like in the background there and not go to the pool bar and hear "We Be Jammin'."
Yeah. At least a few times, right?
at least a few times on your way to an umbrella.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so the style of the show that I watched, or I watched it on YouTube. I listened to it and watched it on YouTube. I felt super comfortable. It was like hanging out with a couple of buddies. I really enjoyed that.
Well, that was another idea. So the thing about this, that's where he was born, 9 Mile Beach, behind me.
Uh-huh.
And so my idea is for every podcast, whatever the topic of the song is, let's say I'm talking about John Lennon, then I'll have Abbey Road in the background. If I can figure out how to do that.
You got this. You can do that. That's a brilliant idea. I love that. Yeah.
But that's only for the YouTube video. So
that's right. Yeah. So I did want to ask you about that too. That was that's a relatively new thing that you're doing, right? Putting it up on YouTube as well.
Yeah. Here's the evolution of that. That's why with the podcasting is so different, because we started out doing it via Zoom.
Uh-huh.
So I started out doing free Zoom, and you got 40-minute time frame or whatever. And I can't tell you how many times I didn't push record on an episode like this, but I did do that. In fact, I still have papers on my desk here that say push record. But we started with Zoom. And then once we started doing the podcast, we realized, well, you could go into that and there's a breakdown with an MP3 and an MP4. I'm already outside my technical skills here.
You're on it. No, you got it.
But that you could put and I got one site. I know people I use Spotify. And so I got it where we put the MP3 down, and then it immediately went to all the different platforms.
Yep.
And Stitcher, you name them, Apple, whatever. And the video editing was a little harder, and that's taken a little. And finally, I'm figuring out. I use iMovie, and then do it and add my pre-roll music and my post-roll, and then I got my son taught me how to do that. He's in his upper 20s, my youngest son. So
okay.
I'm learning, but
you know what? You got to continue to learn, and I do. I love it that you're taking this on. I mean, it's. I think you're discovering that, once you get into it, and I mean, you're able to just make it happen, and then that's where the real craft comes in. So I think you're verging on that, and you're taking this creative endeavor on. So, kudos to you.
Well, I would tell any young people out there, and all you guys, I'm an old people, is that, this is like my third career. I was a physician, and I started out as a heart surgeon for 20-some years. Then I did outpatient kind of wound care and oxygen. And then now I'm doing this, and everything is just put your passion into it. And like you said, you never stop learning. If you stop learning, you're going to be, my father called it, don't ever be freeze dried. He said, if you're freeze dried, they're throwing dirt on your head. So don't be freeze dried. So that's my goal, is don't be freeze dried. I don't want them throwing dirt on my head any faster than I have to have it done.
That is some good wisdom right there. I love it. Thank you for that. Dr. Z, before we wrap things up, I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
Which famous person or celebrity would you be excited to learn that they listen to your podcast?
Musical, it would be Paul McCartney. and sports characters for me, it'd probably be Jack Nicklaus. He was kind of a childhood hero. But those would be mine. I mean, if Paul McCartney was listening to me, I'd have to dive in a hole and go, oh my God, But if you've never heard him in concert, go hear him, because he plays 20-some instruments. He's an amazing talent.
Dr. Z, tell us where people can find out about more about you and your podcast.
Well, you can find my podcast it's Pickin and Puttin, PICKINNPUTTIN.com. That's the website. And you can find it on YouTube. It's at Pickin and Puttin with Dr. Z and Liberty Bill.
Dr. Z, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate your time, your wisdom. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Hey, love it, man. You be good and have a good week. And I really enjoyed it. It was great.
Likewise. Thanks again to Dr. Z. Check the show notes for links to learn more about Dr. Z and his show, Pickin and Puttin. Please share what you got out of my conversation by leaving a review on podchaser.com. You can find out how to do this in the show notes, and do let me know what you need from me to make this show even better for you. And make sure you follow Podcast Tactics to keep learning more about podcasting in future episodes. Thank you.